Welcome to the Tech Report podcast, where we help businesses survive, thrive, and create value.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tech Report, the podcast that is all about helping businesses survive, thrive, and create value, especially in our trying environment today. And I'm going to be your host today. My name is Brad Stoller. So if you own a business or in charge of finding prospects for your business, you may have found what a lot of others are claiming right now, and that it's just difficult. It's more difficult than ever to get people's attention. I've found that myself. It is tough. I've been hearing, from a lot of business owners that they are getting business, but most of it's upsells from their current clients, or maybe they get a strong referral from a really good client. But nobody is bragging about brand new clients who are part of their outbound marketing or sales programs. Most of them really are complaining about the inability to break through and get their prospects' attention. And let's face it, there's just so many people trying to get everybody's attention right now. It's almost like a sea of noise, and we all have a tendency to want to just shut it out, even if it is good for us. So it's a real problem. Or is it? So our guest today knows all about getting the attention of people. He's the founder of Content Monkey Media and has been providing video blogs and almost really any form of media that a client needs to create a terrific brand for his clients. And just the name gives you an idea. Content Monkey Media. That got my attention, like, wow, that's kind of a weird name. So you understand he's kind of a master at this. So he's just as passionate about creating a great message about a client as I am. So I'm not going to go in and talk more about him because right now his head's probably about this big. So I'm going to back it down a little bit. I'm going to let him talk about himself just a little bit. But so without any further delay, I'd like to welcome media specialist Rishi Sood. Rishi, welcome to the Tech Report.
Brad, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, Rishi, let's start out by telling our listeners a little bit about your background. What led you to start Content Monkey Media?
Sure. Well, I actually started out as a musician, believe it or not. And as a musician in the early 2010s, there was a new need at that point to leverage things like social media and online marketing, where 10 years prior to that, maybe it wasn't as much of an emphasis. So I had to really learn from the ground up in terms of how to leverage yourself and get attention on it in the online space. And through trial and error, through starting with my first tweet to ultimately getting my first videos produced and things of that nature, I ended up getting the attention of a few broadcast channels like NBC and CBS and Yahoo and a few other of those mainstream media outlets, which allowed me, and I didn't know at the time, but I was absorbing some lessons in terms of developing content, in terms of what gets people's attention. And like I said, at the time, I didn't know I was doing that. But in hindsight, there were definitely a whole lot of lessons from that period of my life that I was able to take on with me. Although that initial success was quite good, as many musicians come to realize, I was about 22 or 23 at that point, that life was starting to get serious and music wasn't necessarily paying the bills. So exactly. I had to reach a crossroads where ultimately I had a certain skill set through content, which I didn't know was content at the time. And I was able to leverage some of that skill set to attract the attention of a marketing company, which really allowed me to hone what I knew in a strategic way to help other businesses leverage their expertise and get in front of their audiences. Again, at the time, I didn't necessarily consciously know that this was happening, but in retrospect, that's definitely part of the development that brought me to where I am today. Ultimately, I ended up transitioning into my own business, which went through a couple different iterations, which is now ultimately Content Monkey Media. And I like to take some of those exact lessons I learned from, well, at this point, 10 years ago, we're 2021. So, I mean, give or take a couple of years, but the last decade, and apply it to business owners and help them leverage their skills and their expertise to attract the attention of their target audience and get in front of the right people to ultimately build value and awareness of their brand. And like I said, ultimately turn that into viable business for them.
Exactly. So as you said, you had a skill but didn't even really realize it. But in those early days back in 2010, um, was it a rough go, or did you just kind of like fall into place for you? Tell me about some of the struggles maybe you had getting started.
Definitely. So again, whether you're a musician, whether you are a business owner, whether you are a working professional, I think that everyone is prone to ebbs and flows. So when some of my songs, for example, and I'm Canadian, so the song that captured the attention of some of the media outlets back then in 2012, I believe it was actually a response to the NHL, which is the Professional Hockey League, going on lockout. So
Oh, yes.
that, for example, was one of the more successful, let's call it, campaigns in today's terms, which did well. But I mean, like everyone else, again, whether you're a musician or a business owner or so on and so forth, you're also going to have failures. And I certainly had songs or music at that point which didn't do as well as I thought it would, rather. And through those struggles, again, when you're going through it, it sucks because you put your heart in it, you put your soul in it, and you really think it's going to work, and then it doesn't, and oftentimes that leads to discouragement. But what I found is that with what I'm doing today is I know full well why the NHL song did well versus some of the other offerings, music that I had at the time that didn't do so well. To the salient point here is that particular NHL song was topical. It was something that people cared about at that point, at least in the NHL community. I don't necessarily know the whole world cared about it, but certainly people who followed hockey were into it. It was a bit of a kind of statement against the powers that be that were creating league issues. Which I think gave a little bit of a voice to people who were your casual fans and wanted to reiterate some of the things that particular song mentioned. So through the struggles, again, it's about learning what were the driving forces behind some of your successes versus some of the failures. And if you're able to absorb those lessons, then ultimately you're better equipped for the future.
Yep, exactly. And you mentioned a couple things in there, but one thing I picked up on was the fact that the NHL lockout, which most people would think, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible." If you're an NHL fan, I live in Pittsburgh. We got the Pens.
That's right.
Steelers come first until winter.
That's right.
And Steelers go around the whole year. Okay, don't get me wrong,
right.
They do, but the winter months. In fact, it's not really the winter months. It's really all year long, but in summer, we don't really hear too much about it. But man, once the fall hits, except for COVID this year, but even so, the Pens, people in Pittsburgh live and die and breathe hockey. They really do. And until I moved here, I didn't even know how to spell hockey. So if you're an NHL fan, it was a big deal. But the point that I got out of that was you had taken a disaster, so to speak, for NHL fans and players. And you found that the timing was right for what you had to offer. And it took off, didn't it?
That's right.
Good. So I won't make you sing or anything like that, but I just thought that was appropriate because I think where we're going to go with this, any business owner out there that's been struggling a little bit to get their message, there's a lesson right there. So, Rishi, why are business owners failing with their marketing messages?
Well, I think there's probably a variety of factors. I think it's probably a matter of a individual business's own reasons for that. However, I do think that there are probably a couple of core reasons behind it. Number one, I think there's a lack of clarity oftentimes, whether that's a lack of clarity in terms of what exactly I'm going to say on any given day. That is one way a lack of clarity manifests itself. Another lack of clarity potentially is how often I'm going to say it or how I'm going to say it, whether it's a video outreach, whether it's a blog, whether it's a podcast. And I think that whether it is one of the examples I just provided or another form of clarity issues, I think oftentimes people just don't have a clear path in terms of how they want to get their message out there. So I think that's one reason. Number two, I think, is also just the truth of the matter is it's a matter of time. I think business owners are focused, as they should be, on their business. They have their own client needs. They have their own fulfillment needs. They have their own team development needs. They have a whole lot of array of issues that any particular business owner has in a given day. week, month, year. And oftentimes what that means is content or marketing, which often can be considered a little bit of a luxury, especially from a time perspective, gets thrown a little bit to the wayside. So as a business owner, when you are focused on your business and trying to make all of the moving parts work in a way that keeps your clients happy, marketing is often one of the first things that tends to like I said, fall off the map in terms of things that get done consistently. So I think that, again, every business will have their own reasons if they are not doing a good job with getting their message out there. But I think those will probably be the two biggest reasons, the most common reasons that business owners will face.
I think so. And if you think about it as a business owner, okay, I'm a business owner. We're all business owners, right? If I do nothing more than make social media posts, if I do nothing more than do, podcast episodes 24/7, then my business has effectively changed into, now I'm becoming more of a social media business than I am my own business that I started, right?
Sure.
So it makes sense. It's hard to really focus, on getting the message out there when you got so many hats you're wearing. I don't care if you're a small business. I don't care if you're a technology business. I work a lot of MSPs, for example, but they struggle with this a lot, as do other business owners. It's not just them. But I guess understanding that business owners have to wear a lot of hats. So there's one big thing, I guess, that you could tell business owners today that could change their thinking of content marketing, and what would that be to them? What's your biggest piece of advice for them?
I think business owners need to do a better job of trusting their own expertise, and how that shows up in a content perspective. And the conversation we're having right now is that if you know that your clients tend to struggle with whether it's one thing or a series of things, then you know that that is a metric or data, so to speak, that you can trust in the form of, well, if my clients are struggling with X, Y, and Z, then I can form content that helps address those issues because I know that my clients struggle with them. So I think that's also a good kind of backing point to what we just discussed about clarity, is that if you're unclear about, hey, well, what do I talk about? I think that the way to move forward is about getting clear about what your clients want to hear. Your clients, to be blunt, don't care about your 20-year experience. They don't care about your origin story. They don't care about your favorite, flavor of ice cream. I mean, they have no concern in the world about any of those things.
Are you, hang on a second, I'm going to interrupt for a second. Are you trying to tell me that the prospects that I try and push my messages out, really, are you saying they don't care about me? Is that what you're saying? That's what I'm hearing.
Exactly right.
That's exactly right. Well, I'm going to have to start over then.
It's not a reflection on you. That's not a reflection on me. That's not a reflection on anyone who's listening to this. It's just a pure, that's how human beings work. I mean, I care about my needs first and foremost. There's nothing wrong with that. But as a business owner, you need to be realistic about that's how the way people think. So if that's the case, then again, you can talk as long as you want about how much experience you have or your credentials or this or that, but your clients and the audience that you're speaking to care primarily about their own needs. So your content needs to be in alignment to address those needs in which you are trying to talk about, and is relevant to your community, because otherwise no one's going to listen. I think that's probably the biggest deciding factor behind what types of content does well and what types of content doesn't do well. You are not going to have an NHL lockout every year to talk about. You're not going to have whatever is important on the grand scheme of things in the world to talk about every day or every week. But your clients will always have needs. And if you can talk to those needs, then you become that beacon of light that people look to and ultimately end up saying, I want to work with this individual because they know what they're talking about relative to my needs.
So this really does come back to one of the very first principles of really business in general, and is you really have to know your prospect. And
Sure.
If you don't understand, there's a gentleman that I follow. I'll give him credit. His name's Dean Jackson. In fact, he's from Toronto. He's a fellow Canadian, but he's big on saying, in fact, I think he stole this from somebody else, but that's all right. I'll give Dean credit. Joining the conversation that's already gone in your prospect's mind. and you have to be able to figure out what that conversation is, and that's really before you start making content. That's a big deal, isn't it?
That's right. I've seen content again about uh, people's journey and how they came to, and that's fine. But I think that there's a difference between telling your story because you're telling your story versus telling your story because it sets a foundation to a lesson that you're trying to portray, which then ultimately helps. So I'm not saying that take any verbiage about your experience off your website. That's not all what I'm saying. But I think that that experience needs to make sense from a content perspective, at least in terms of why that means anything to your clients. So that's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. And if you hadn't noticed, go back and watch the beginning of this podcast, and you notice the story that I told. It was to set you up.
That's right.
So you
That's
can
right.
tell why content is important rather
Right.
than tell what your, like you said, your favorite color. Nobody cares.
That's right.
Nobody cares about my favorite color. They just don't. But there's a problem out there. And most of the people listening today are facing this problem, and they don't know what to do about content. They hire a
That's right.
social media expert and they throw something out there and that, well, content doesn't work. Well, that's like going to your primary care physician when you're having a heart attack and then, well, he didn't help me much, when there's a cardiologist down the street and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe he did that.
That's
So
right.
exactly. So, well, let's change gears just a little bit here. And why on earth is content marketing so important and critical today versus just a couple of years ago? And why should a business owner really care about content marketing to begin with?
Well, I think content is more so a vehicle. I think that if you look, from the dawn of humanity, people have been telling stories since human beings had any form of communication, right?
So the
And
caveman writing
if
stuff on
you
the wall. Now that's what you're getting at.
That's right. So
Content marketing.
storytelling, if you think of it, whether it be a theological story or whether it just be a few friends around a campfire, is a form of content. So that just goes back to the way human beings like to communicate. And again, content itself, if you're looking at the online sphere, is a relatively young concept. However, the actual foundational element behind content goes back to the way human beings have been communicating for, like I said, the dawn of civilization, basically. So content is more so a vehicle than it is this pillar, this infallible pillar that you need to adhere to necessarily. It is a form or a way to get your message to your core audience. So the reason that it's important is because that is how human beings tend to find ways to resonate with people. You get attached to people when they provide you with value. So I would say that to answer your question in kind of a more succinct way is that your clients care about you because you are offering value to them in some way, shape, or form. And how you offer that value is content is a vehicle in order to actually offer that value in which I'm speaking on. So that's the primary reason that content makes a difference. If you think about talking back to your point about social media, is anything from I ate a cheeseburger this morning to this fully edited, professionally animated video is a form of content. Now, I ate a cheeseburger this morning is maybe not the best form of content out there because, again, I mean, to put it bluntly, who cares? But it is, in essence, a form of content. So if you are going to be active on social media, you have to have something to speak on. And content, again, is that vehicle to do so. So in order to keep up in the world in 2021 and beyond, you have to have some sort of mechanism to connect with the people that you're hoping to connect with.
Yeah, exactly. And Rishi, one of the things that when you and I had talked earlier,
Mhm.
I know that there's a lot of people out there that okay, so maybe they're not, maybe they call themselves content professionals. Okay, social media managers, whatever you want to call it. And it's really just, maybe it's somebody that's in college and they don't have a job, and what the heck, they like to put the pizza on there, what they ate, and people look at it and they think, oh, I'm a content manager, right? And then they think, well, let me go into business where, because they have more money, so let me put my pizza slice thing on for this business. and I'll get them a bunch of views. I'll get them noticed. I'll get them famous. Okay, so you and I both know that that's a really, really big waste of money, isn't it? So what do you think is keys to whether they hire you, for example, or hire somebody else? What really should they look for in a content manager, content writer, whether it's film, video, written content? What should they really be looking for, and why is it so critical to get somebody who really knows their stuff, even if it costs 2-3 times more? Is that a loaded question?
No, I think it's a great question. I think that there's probably, again, I think it's one of those things that has many answers, but I think that you can break it down into a couple different things. And I think probably the most important of which is you need to look for someone who has a process in place to get to know you and your client, and you and that individual's client.
Right.
And the reason that needs to happen is because of everything that we've spoken about thus far. You cannot hire someone to write a blog and throw them to the wolves, because unless that person that you're hiring has some type of process to get to know about your business, get to know about your clients, get to know about your clients' issues, they're not going to be able to do a good enough job to, again, resonate with that audience, because they're not experts in your business. You're the expert in your business, and you need someone who does a good enough job absorbing that information to then develop content which will resonate with that audience. So if you're hiring someone, and even if you're, handling it yourself, it's not just about putting up a pizza emoji, for example. It's about, again, getting clear on what it is that's going to resonate with people the best that you can. And after you start executing that, you're going to get a better idea of what is resonating and what isn't. For example, if you are a sales professional and you notice that you are getting no engagement on anything you're putting out there, whether it's through a newsletter, whether it's through social media, whether it's through a blog, on any of your topics, except for prospecting, for example, or cold emailing, whatever the case might be, then that's an indication to say that my audience cares a whole lot about prospecting. So rather than talking about prospecting once a quarter, maybe I'm talking about prospecting twice a month. And that alone is a huge shift in approach, because now you've identified exactly what's resonating with your audience. So while some of that information comes after a strategy has been executed and you are now looking at what that strategy has bared in terms of fruits of your labor, you still need a person who is able to get inside your mind well enough to have a good enough strategic plan forward to get those insights to make pivots if needed. So if you are hiring someone who is not doing those things and saying, sure, just give me access to your website and I'll start writing. Well, what are you writing about? And how do you know that that's going to be of any value to the audience that you're speaking to? So I think that that's probably the biggest thing to look for in terms of hiring someone and your own approach to content.
Exactly. And one of the things, and I do understand the sales process extremely well. I've lived it for a long time. And one of since you brought salespeople, well, anybody that's in sales right now that's watching this, especially a sales, let's say an account executive, and let's say they're tasked with find people, find prospects, and you've got to make $150 a day. And if you're a salesperson and you don't like making $150 a day, you've got some pain involved here. Mm-hmm. Now you're looking for, what can I do to get those prospects? Well, if I fail, then I know I have to go back and do the grindstone. I got to be on the phone for 8 hours or 10 hours to get my $150 in, or I'm going to get fired. Now you're addressing that person. Your content can be tailored towards that person, and you're going to get their attention, aren't you? I'm going to listen if I'm in that situation. I'm going to listen because I'm going to want to find some value of what I can do. So imagine that scenario. Okay, forget the sales part of it. Well, it's all sales part, I guess, but go to a business owner now. If I've got a sales rep who's really good at closing, man, does she hate making cold calls. What can I do? Because I don't really want to fire the person. Because, man, she's really good. She gets along with people. Oh, my gosh. She doesn't talk to that many, but boy, the ones she talks to, Her closing ratio is off the charts, and we do get business. I just like to be able to get more.
That's right.
So this is where we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If someone is experiencing any type of hardship or any type of problem, whether it's on a macro level, something that is consistent throughout their life, or whether it's just on a day-to-day thing, everyone wants a solution to their problem, right? So if you can show up with the answers, or at least some sort of guidance to open some new ways of thinking, even, then that alone is a way that you show up for people and build trust, which again, just talking about business concepts 101 are all important pillars to ultimately building a business and acquiring clients.
Exactly. And there's really a big difference between picking up a phone, dialing somebody who has no clue who you are or what you do, then hold off just a second on picking up that phone. Let's start to get and build a relationship through content, right? Where they get to know you. In fact, what ends up happening, a lot of times people will raise their hand because they downloaded something or they commented on an article. And if I'm a smart, savvy sales exec, I'm going to pay attention to that, because if I'm going to pick up the phone, I want to use every ounce of time I have to be productive. So I'm going to call those people first. As long as I've got a bucket of people who are commenting, downloading something, I'm going to get on the phone and talk to them because I know they're warm, right? Or at least they've raised their hand that they're interested. And to me, that makes a lot more sense than just picking up a phone and just have no clue who they are. They don't know who you are, and bounce through, and you get maybe a 1% return on 100 dials. You got one conversation, but it takes a lot more than one conversation to find out if they're a fit or not. So it could take you a week or 2 weeks of doing this before you get somebody that's actually a fit for your company, right? Am I way off on this?
No, that makes total sense.
So now we start to understand the importance of having good content. Okay, let me back up. Great content that can actually be part of a sales process, not just thought of something, oh, I got to brand my company, so I'll just throw some stuff out there. That to me, that's a waste of money. So good stuff. So, well, Rishi, we talked about a lot here, and we don't want to go too much more on the time here, but what are we missing so far? What do you feel is important for business owners out there that when it comes to content? What have we missed so far?
Well, I think we covered a lot. I think that for someone who is interested in up leveling their content, I would recommend that number one, have a plan for consistency, meaning that making sure that you have the resources to not just put out one video a quarter and say that will be my content. You want to try and get in front of your audience at least once a week or have some type of consistency. So talking back to what you just spoke on in terms of just putting a brand out there, it ties back into the same point, is you want to have some type of strategic way forward. So if you are very video focused and that's where you want to focus your time, great, but you need to make sure that you have the resources to make sure that video content is consistent and you're not just putting out one and then no one's hearing from you for another 6 months, right? Because video content can be very labor intensive. So before you dive into anything, like I said, tying back to some original points, is you need to build some clarity and you need to take the time to be strategic about how you're going to approach this. I would say that it's better having 4 blogs a month, as opposed to having 2 videos a year. So from the thought perspective of business owners, I really want to put video out there. Great, but you need to do so in a way that will ensure that you can be consistent about it. So if it's a matter of 2 videos a year versus 1 blog a week, so 52 blogs a week, well, do the math on how much more touch points you can potentially have with your audience. So I think that we've talked a lot about this already, but I think if there's one point to really think about, it's being strategic about how you're going to move forward and make sure that number one, that you're clear on what you're talking about and who you're talking to. And number two, having a strategy so that you can be consistent, because way too many people start a blog and then stop it after 2 weeks. you need a little bit more consistency. You need a little bit more tenacity in terms of getting that content out there. You're not going to have raving fans after your first 2 blogs. It's just not going to happen
Come
unless you already
on.
have
All that time and effort we put into it. Come on, everybody's going to love me right away.
2 hours, right? That's right. You need a strategy in place to make it long-term sustainable. And what I'm not saying is that it's going to take 5 years before you have any type of leverage or anything to look forward to. But what I am saying is that you need a little bit of patience and a little bit of consistency. And throughout that, you're going to start seeing people little by little are going to start tuning in. And as long as you're consistent with it, they're not going to have any reason to go elsewhere or stop tuning in because they know that they can expect more and more from you.
Yep, exactly. Well, boy, we've covered some really good stuff here. And this is just really the tip of the iceberg. Okay, there's so much into successful content marketing. But you really, in my opinion, you really need to have somebody on your team that really knows their stuff. You really do, rather than just hiring somebody because as a friend of a friend at church or something like that, and they're good on social media because the pizza thing. Okay, but it's a big deal to get somebody who knows what they're doing. So, Rishi, how can people reach you if they have some questions?
Sure. So contentmonkeymedia.com is probably the best place to start. And Content Monkey Media, it's all those words are spelled exactly as you would imagine they should be spelled, .com. And that is obviously my website where you can see a little bit of the types of content that we're able to produce for you, and also see a little bit of our work, which is on there as well, and ultimately connect if there is a reason to, and there's some sort of interest there to talk about how we can help with your content efforts. Even if it's just a question, I'm always happy to answer questions so people can get in touch that way. And that's probably just the best way to move forward. And I think that even just visiting our website, you'll see the different types of content that you can potentially put out there. We've talked a lot about blogs, we've talked a lot about video, but there's a whole slew of things you could do, whether it's imagery, whether it's infographics, whether it's ebooks, or whether it's maybe some more modern iteration of ebooks, or whether it is podcasts or audio, whatever the case might be. I mean, I spoke about music in terms of content. That's very much content. I mean, it may not be for business owners, but it can be. You see all the time where a business owner puts out like a rap or something along those lines, and it just goes viral. Yeah. So music is also a content type which may not be immediately recognizable as such. So there's a whole number of ways to leverage your expertise in a way that makes sense. So contentmonkeymedia.com will hopefully, like I said, offer some ways forward for people.
Sounds good. I do agree with you. Music is a good, but be careful with that, because that can backfire. Because if I'm going to sing, for example, that might go viral, but not in the way I want. Okay,
that's
so
right.
people can avoid me like the plague. But
that goes back to the point about being strategic before you do anything.
Good point. I left out the strategic music part. You got it. Right. So anyways, well, thanks again to Rishi Sood for spending some time with us today and really sharing some different ways to help you get the attention of your prospects. So Rishi, again, a big thanks for taking the time out of your day. And I really hope some people get some good nuggets. And if they have some questions, reach out to Rishi. He's been a great guy. He's helped me a lot.
Brad, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. It's been a good conversation.